On Dharma Night, we we do like a loose series over a number of evenings. So we've been doing a series on symbols, Buddhist symbols, which is led on from a series on the imagination. But don't worry if you weren't here for either any of the other nights. They kind of stand alone, but we do kind of follow a thread as well. So we've been looking at Buddhist symbols. In the first week, we looked at the symbol of the moon and the significance of the symbol of the moon in Buddhism. Last week, we had the person who was going to be leading the class was ill, so we had an impromptu conversation. We talked about myths, dreams, and symbols. And then tonight, I'm going to be carrying on that series, looking at the image or the symbol of the path and the lotus. And so when we talk about symbols in Buddhism, we're basically talking about kind of images, symbols that kind of have indefinable meanings. In a way, you can't say so much about symbols because they're meant to talk to our kind of more irrational, not irrational in a bad way, like non-rational kind of depths. So Buddhism is actually Buddhism speaks a lot in terms of concepts. It's a very coherent conceptual system, and all of the teachings actually map onto each other really well, and it's a very coherent system of concepts. But Buddhism also majorly talks in symbols as well. It talks in symbols, imagery, myths, stories. And the point of all of those parts of the practice is to speak to our depths, really, the parts of us that the rational mind doesn't touch. Yeah, so actually our rational mind is actually quite a small part of us. There's much more of us that's kind of this deeper, kind of more less rational, more emotional parts of ourselves, and symbols kind of talk to this part of ourselves. So in a way, what we're doing over these next few, over this series, is we're just trying to evoke the symbols. Because in a way, symbols point towards truths that you can't quite pin down. And they also have lots of different meanings, or you can take lots of different things from them. So in a way, when we're talking about symbols, we're really going to be talking around symbols and trying to kind of hint at or kind of talk around what they might be getting at. But in a way, what we're doing is we're just evoking a symbol and staying with it through the evening and letting that have an effect on us, because that's what symbols do. In the way that if you looked at the image of the Buddha for a long time, it would have an effect. It would have an effect on you. And all of these images in Buddhism, all of these symbols in Buddhism, if we really reflect on them and stay with them, they have an effect. And they have things to teach us. They have truths to teach us. And yeah, today we're going to be looking at the symbol of the path and the lotus. And they sound quite different. They sound like quite different symbols, but I've put these two together because I think they're contrasting but complementary symbols. I think they're both important in the spiritual life. So we could look at the spiritual life, the life of trying to work on the mind. We could think of it as a path. We could think of it as I'm here and there's a path that I can move along to get to a destination and to get to somewhere where I'm trying to go. So that's the way that we think of the path. Or we could look at the spiritual life as the growth and an unfolding of a lotus. Yeah, so kind of we are a lotus that's unfolding and growing. And both of these images have their different emphases, and they're both drawing out different aspects of the spiritual life. And I'm going to say a lot more about both of them, but I wanted to start with us just all exploring together what's our response to these, and what do we think they're trying to communicate. So these symbols are trying to communicate to us something of the spiritual life, for lack of a better term. I think when I say spiritual life, I mean a life that's dedicated to trying to develop, trying to grow our mind, trying to cultivate positive qualities. And because that's what Buddhism's trying to get us to do. It's trying to help us develop a mind that's more wise, more compassionate. So when I say the spiritual life, that's what I mean, really. It's a life where we're trying to do that. We're trying to move our minds in a positive direction. So we're going to get into threes, And I want you to talk about, what does the symbol of the path, what do you think the symbol of the path tells us about the spiritual life? What might the image of the path be trying to communicate? And the same with, what does the symbol of the lotus tell us about the spiritual life, and what's that trying to communicate? So really try and unpack these in your threes. Try to unpack them and think, what might these symbols be trying to communicate to us? And you can also, if you notice any limitations about the symbol either. So all of these symbols will have like strengths, and not so much weaknesses, but there'll be limitations to them. They'll emphasize one thing, but inevitably one symbol can't emphasize everything. So you think, what are the limitations of them as well? Yeah. So what does the path tell us about the spiritual life? What does the lotus tell us about the spiritual life? And are there any limitations in either of the symbols? So if you want to get into threes, and we'll have about I'll give you about 10 minutes to explore that. So just find a couple of people near you, and you can explore that together. So yeah, before the break, we discussed the images the symbols of the path and the lotus, and we're going to look at them one at a time now, and then we're going to talk about their implications together. But let's start off. We're going to look at the path. So I'd be interested to hear, what do people say about the path? The questions I gave you were kind of, what do they say? What do the symbols of the path and the lotus say or communicate about the spiritual life? And are there any limitations of the symbols? So let's start with the path. What do people think the path is communicating to us about the spiritual life?
In our group, we all kind of thought about different things when it comes to the path. So some of us were thinking it's kind of like a clear, almost route. And then others of us were like, oh, you don't know where it's going, it's through the forest, you can't always see. Maybe the path splits. And then I was thinking about more like stepping stones in a way, where you have to take a little leap from one to the next. So we all kind of had different ideas.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So yeah, maybe there's like really clear, straight down there, that's where I'm going. Or maybe we have to like hack through the jungle to find the path. Or yeah, like you're saying, maybe it's kind of like, okay, here, okay, now which one do I go on? Okay, go there. So yeah, different. That's interesting. Yeah, George.
I was in our group, I was kind of contrasting it with, I don't know, do you want to contrast it yet, or just talk about the...
Say what you want, it's fine.
That's their tradition. So my interpretation, but judging by the poem, I don't know if I got this right. It's like the path is kind of more like striving. It's like I need to get to B and A. I didn't think about like, maybe you don't even know what B is, but then I was comparing that to the lotus, which is more just like, if the lotus gets the conditions it needs, sun, water, etc., it just happens. So it doesn't have to like do anything. So it's almost like receptive versus. But then the poem, I think the second poem was more talking about compassion and things. Don't worry so much about that. Yeah, you're definitely onto stuff. We'll look at that. We'll look at that later on. But yeah, you're definitely onto things there with that. Yeah. Anyone else? A couple more. Yeah.
I think there's something about, say, focus on the journey, not the destination, an overlap between kind of neurological pathways, and you go down one route and you have to kind of go different ways to establish new routes and enjoy kind of the scenery and different things, rather than it being so, what does the actual path look like? And you're so focused on, where am I actually going, and is it a loop, is it? And not knowing that can cause a lot of distress in itself, but kind of like admiring the different views as you go along, and maybe each of us has a different path, and sometimes we cross pathways and stepping stones, and I don't know, run into a bear at some point, so it's just
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like, it's like we hack our own route through the path, don't we? I guess, you mentioned like neurological pathways, but in Buddhism we talk about karma and kind of like actions, kind of, they make a groove in the mind, in a way that's like, maybe digging a bit of a path, it's interesting. Yeah, one more.
We had there was a bit of a discussion about how you know whether you're on the right path, and we also had that the path is a kind of a channel for active energy. You can do something with the path. You can kind of move towards something and use your effort to do something.
Yeah, it's definitely got some of that in the image, doesn't it? And yeah, I'll talk in a bit about what happens to our mind as we move along the path. So hopefully that will give us a bit of a sense of how do we know if it's working, kind of thing. How do we know the path's working? I'll try and remember to come back to that. Great, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's all good, interesting stuff. So yeah, I think all of you are kind of onto something with that. So yeah, the image of the path is one of the primary images in Buddhism. So Buddhism talks in all sorts of ways, and it's developed over 2,500 years. There's all sorts of different ways that Buddhism's communicated, but the image of the path is one of the primary ways that it communicates. And it's basically like there is us here, there's a path suggests there's us here, there's a destination over there, and there's a way to get there. Yeah, so in the most basic sense, that's what a path is. And from a Buddhist perspective, when we're talking about the path, what it's saying is we are unenlightened, there is the possibility of enlightenment, and there's a way to get there. Yeah, and the path is the way to get there. So as an unenlightened being, there is something that we can do that will move us in the direction of enlightenment, which is the end goal. So I guess here we talked about there's like different versions of the path, but in this one it's definitely like there's a goal there that we're aiming towards, and there's things we can do to get there. So some of the core teachings of the Buddha use this image of the path. So there's two in particular which are said to be the earliest teachings of the Buddha that he communicated. This was his first communication after his enlightenment. He taught the threefold path. So that's the image of the path. So that's the path of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So kind of how we act, what we do with our mind, and reflecting on the way that things are. And he also taught the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's the path of perfect vision, perfect emotion, perfect action, perfect speech, perfect livelihood, perfect effort, perfect awareness, and perfect samadhi, which is kind of basically an enlightened state of absorption and meditation. So both of these use the image of the path. So in a way, that's the first symbol that the Buddha used, even though Buddhism developed over thousands of years, talking different ways. But the first image, the first symbol that the Buddha used to communicate his teaching was the path. So it's really significant. And in a way, people often talk about is Buddhism a religion or not? And one of the things that I think is helpful in that is Buddhism. It's not so much that it's a religion, although you could argue that it's a religion, but it's a path of spiritual practice. So it's one of the most helpful ways to communicate what Buddhism is really, is this language of the path. So it's a path of practices that can move us in a certain direction. So there are specific practices we do, specific practices that the Buddha taught that are going to help us cultivate qualities and see things in a certain way that will move us in the direction of enlightenment. So that is the goal of Buddhism, is to gain a mind or kind of reveal a mind that is enlightened. And there are things that we can do to get there. And like I said, I'm not going to be able to go into all of them, but one of the main ways we can think about that is ethics, which is what we do with our body, our speech, and our mind, basically how we're acting in the world. What we're doing in meditation, so working on the mind with the mind, and then reflecting on wisdom teachings. And so by reflecting on wisdom teaching, drip by drip, we start to see things differently. We start to see things in a way that's much closer to how things actually are. And through seeing things in those ways, we alleviate our suffering, and we're able to be of more benefit in the world. So that's the things that we need to do if we want to follow the path. And as we follow on the path, it's said that there's a list of mental states, or there's a list of things that open up as we move along the path. So I'm just going to read that. So hopefully that gives us a bit of a sense, like Dara said, that how do we know if we're following the right path? How do we know if it's working? Well, from a Buddhist perspective, if we're really following this path, these mental states will open up, and they kind of lead one into the other. So the first one, we just start with awareness. So that's kind of the primary starting place of Buddhism, is cultivating awareness, whether that's awareness of our body, awareness of our feelings, awareness of our surroundings, awareness of other people, all of these things. We just want to develop a mind that's much more aware. And then with that greater awareness, what will naturally happen is we'll start to investigate our mental states and start to see which ones are positive and which ones are negative. And so which ones are helpful and which ones are unhelpful. In Buddhist language, we talk about skillful and unskillful. So when we say here, we say investigate, but actually this naturally happens as well. So the more aware we become, the more we start to notice, actually, I've done this thing and now I feel rubbish. So I've acted in this way and now I feel worse, and I can see that. And on the other hand, I act in this way, I'm generous or kind or something, and you start to realize, I actually feel a lot better. So there might be some investigating that happens, but also it just naturally happens that we start to be more aware of what actions are leading us in a positive direction and what actions are leading us in a harmful direction. And then with that knowledge, with the awareness of what's skillful and unskillful, what's helpful and unhelpful, we then start to make an effort to cultivate the positive and eradicate the negative, or whatever word you want to think of, kind of getting rid of the negative mental states. So once we've seen what's helpful and what's unhelpful, we'll naturally then start making an effort to cultivate the positive, cultivate a more positive mind. And then from that, this leads to a state of joy. Yeah, so a state of joy starts to naturally emerge in the mind. And this is a mind that's free from regret, basically, free from remorse, free from thinking, I wish I hadn't done that. Because actually that state of, I wish I hadn't done that, that's painful. So if we act in a way that we're completely proud of, in a way, not in a kind of like pride sort of way, but just we can think well of ourselves for acting in that way, joy naturally arises. So from kind of ethical behaviour, not ethical in the like, you should do this, but it's just behaviour that just naturally comes from a positive place, that leads to joy. And as that joy starts to overflow, that leads to states of tranquility, states of kind of bliss, we could call it. And then from this blissful state of mind, our mind starts to unify, our mind starts to become absorbed. And then from that place, that culminates in what we could call equanimity. And equanimity, from a Buddhist point of view, is a mind that's completely unperturbed by the ups and downs of life. So we can talk about the worldly winds, so that's kind of like praise and blame. So when we do something and people praise us, we get really happy about it, and when people blame us, we get really down about it, we get really insecure. Or gaining things, when we get something and we feel really good, but then we lose things and we feel really bad. There's all of these kind of winds in life that blow us around. But an enlightened mind is completely unperturbed by any of that. Yeah, so it just remains in complete equanimity. So the final stage of this stage of equanimity, is basically synonymous with enlightenment. So a mind that's completely unshakable, unperturbable, and that's where it leads. So that's kind of what what Buddhism lays out as the path that we follow. That's the mental states that emerge as we follow the path. And yeah, the path, it isn't that the path, there's like an objective entity out there. And it's not that the path will necessarily look identical for everyone. If you stay around long enough to get to know different Buddhists, you start to realise actually it looks very different for everyone. What people's lives look like is very different, but there will be some commonalities. Yes, the commonalities will be that people are trying to work on their actions. They're trying to act in a kind, generous, thoughtful, truthful way. They'll be trying to work on their mind in meditation, and they'll be trying to develop a bigger perspective and trying to see things more clearly. Yeah, so those things will be the same, but actually how that looks, kind of what they do for their livelihood, what they do, where they live, who they live with, that all might be very different. So it's not that the path is kind of this narrow telling you exactly how you should live. But it's more of like things that we can do so that we move in the direction of enlightenment. And yeah, so the path is there to help us grow. And all human beings, they have this, well, we all have this deep desire to grow, whether we realize it or not. Within all of us, there's this deep desire to feel like we're growing. And if we're not growing, we suffer, basically. If we don't have a sense of, oh, I'm moving in a positive direction, we start finding life very difficult. And part of the problem with this is there are forces in our mind that aren't helping us grow. Particularly, I think, for all of us, particularly for me, there's definitely a part of me that thinks I just really want an easy life. The idea of having an easy life seems really appealing. So if I ever imagine things that kind of require something of me, whether that's kind of like having a difficult conversation, taking on more responsibility at work, kind of even like giving a talk sometimes when it's like, oh no, I'm going to have to be in front of people talking. It's like, oh, actually it feels, oh, it'd be much easier if I was just at home or whatever. But actually, if we get into a state, well, if I get into a state where I'm not doing things that are challenging me, that aren't actually moving me in a direction, I don't feel satisfied. I start finding life quite difficult, really. So it's like that narrative that we want an easy life, it's not actually true. So on one level, we're kind of drawn towards comfort and we're drawn towards ease. But on a deeper level, actually, we don't want that. On a deeper level, we want to have this feeling that I'm moving forward in my life, that I'm growing in my life, that I'm transforming in a way. So I think we need to be very careful of that voice. I need to be careful of that voice that's telling me I want an easy life. So it's good to look out for that, because actually it's when we're challenging ourselves, it's when we're transforming that we'll actually be satisfied. So yeah, we've got this symbol of the path going forward, but the opposite of the path in Buddhism is kind of a wheel. Yeah, so the wheel just goes round and round. So rather than moving, rather than growing, we just go round and round. And what basically happens is we swing between grasping after pleasure and pushing away pain. So that's what our mind is going to be doing a lot of the time. It's going to be imagining or seeing things that we think are going to give us pleasure, and we're going to be grasping after it, which causes us suffering. Or we're going to be imagining things or seeing things that threaten us, and we're going to be pushing them away. And so a lot of our time we spend in that kind of wheel, going round between pleasure and pain. And then basically, when we're in this state, we do the same things again and again, but we expect to have a different result. We expect to have some deep satisfaction, even though we're just doing the same things that haven't worked. And the opposite to this is the spiral. So there's the wheel where we're going round and round, but the spiral is where we kind of break out of that wheel, and then we go up and up through progressively positive mental states. So that's kind of the path that I said earlier. The list's fairly similar to that in terms of developing this joy, this tranquility, this equanimity. But it goes up, rather than going round and round, it goes up and up and up to higher and higher states of mind. And so we want to be trying to do things that kind of break us out of the wheel, that break us out of this wheel between going between pleasure and pain. And one of the things that's really good for that is by meditating and developing awareness. So when I first started meditating, I was 18 at the time, and I was basically in a grip of depression and anxiety. I wasn't enjoying life. I couldn't find any joy in life, and everything just felt quite scary, basically. But I started meditating, and very, very quickly, meditation, it just managed to break me out of that wheel just slightly, just to begin with. So it was like I was just going around the same old patterns, going around the same old mental states. But once I started developing even just a little bit of awareness, it made me able to just break out of that wheel slightly. And once we kind of break out of that wheel, once we break out of those habits, something new can emerge, and then we actually have choice, and we can start to act in ways that are actually going to help us rather than just keep on causing us suffering. So I've been meditating for about 14 or so years now, and looking back, well, if I look back over that time, I can see that I'm definitely not like well near the top of the path, but I can definitely see my mental states day to day are so much better than I could even have imagined when I was in the grip of that wheel. But it started with just that momentary awareness that we can build through meditation, just giving us a chance to break free of going round and round the same old patterns. Okay, so I'll just say a couple more bits on the path and then we'll move on to the Lotus. So with the path, it also inevitably evokes the metaphor of the journey. In a way, we can't have a path without travelling along it. So it evokes this metaphor of the journey. And the myth of the journey is so important in loads of myths and stories. Kind of not every, but most strong myths and stories have some sort of journey in there. So this deeply resonates with human beings. And our experience of our lives. There's something about going on a journey that deeply resonates with us. And that must be one of the reasons why the Buddha used this language of the path so much. And one of the things of a journey is that we overcome obstacles, don't we? So in a journey, it's not a real journey unless we face obstacles and we overcome them. And this happens as we start to work on our mind. So as we start to work on our mind, we're going to face challenges. We're going to face difficulties. We're going to face our difficult mental states and our habits, and it will require effort and it will require patience to overcome them. And in a way, it's overcoming these things that actually sets us on the path as well. So we want to be cultivating these positive mental states, but we also need to be transforming these difficult mental states, these negative mental states. So overcoming the obstacles is part of the path. And in a way, if we can hold this image of the path, it can actually give us a lot of resource. It can give us a lot of motivation when things get challenging. So both Carl Jung and Viktor Frankl, who are kind of 20th century psychologists, they both point out that human resilience is deeply tied to finding meaning in things. So when we can weave the challenges that we're facing into a larger purposeful narrative, often this image of a journey, the suffering that we're experiencing as a trial, rather than experiencing it just as this trial to bear, it actually gives us something to kind of overcome. And it gives us meaning to what we're experiencing. So if we can see that our life within this myth of the journey or within this symbol of the path, it means that when we face difficulty, we can draw on that symbol, we can draw on that myth to help us keep moving forward on the path. So yeah, the path communicates as well. So someone else mentioned this at the beginning, but we need to make effort. So the fact that there's a path means that we need to make effort to move along it. So we're here, we want to get there, and it's going to require effort for us to move in that direction. And on the whole, Buddhism's a very kind of do-it-yourself religion. Yeah, so there's the teachings there, but the Buddha said, I can't do it for you. No one can practice for you in a way. All we can do is try and practice ourselves and try and grow ourselves, but that will require effort. So whether that's to get up in the morning and meditate, whether it's to kind of look at our actions, see where we've acted well or not well and try to improve that, or to try and learn about these teachings and apply them to our lives so that we can have a wiser perspective on our life. All of these things will require effort. So with the image of the path, it's kind of implicit, well, it's implied, or it's explicit even, that there's going to be effort involved. So I'm just going to finish on the path with a quote from Sanghadharin that I think sums up this whole area on the path very well. So he says, Buddhism is presented as a path or way, but this is only a manner of speaking. The path is a symbol, representing the fact that we can change, we can develop. If we know what we are now and what we can become, we can take steps to effect that transition. We have the capacity and the freedom to perceive and to realize our best interests. Yeah, so that's what the path, that's what the image of the path is getting at. It's telling us that we have the capacity and we have the freedom to realize what's best for us in the highest sense and move in that direction. Yeah. Okay, so we'll leave the path there for now, and we'll move on to the lotus now. So what did let's cast our minds back to our conversations earlier. What did people think about the lotus? What does the lotus tell us about the spiritual life, about the trying to live a life of growth? It was a long time ago now, wasn't it? Oh, yeah, do you? Mm-hmm.
I was reminded of the phrase "no mud, no lotus,"
Mm.
and I think I really loved the poem that you read at the end
Mm.
of the meditation,
Mm.
and describing like the lotus growing out of the lake of tears.
Mm. Mm.
That because often when we encounter like challenges or something that causes us suffering,
Mm.
we forget that can be used as material for our growth.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. It's good, isn't it? No mud, no lotus. It's like if that wasn't there, we wouldn't then get what comes from that. So, in a way, it's similar to the facing obstacles or something, isn't it? But it's a different image for the same thing of like actually, it's through those experiences that we will grow. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lotus is beautiful, but also it represents a sort of peacefulness or stillness, because it's usually quite static, while the water around it might ripple or something. So, I think there's some meaning in that.
And even the growth of a lotus is very slow, isn't it? In a way, it's like it does change, but you wouldn't see it suddenly, like ding. It's kind of like it is this is slow. Whereas on the path, you can have much more of a sense of like, yeah. And one more. Yeah.
I think for me, the lotus is kind of a being that survives through receiving. So it receives light, it receives water, it gathers nutrients from the earth. And I think sometimes there is an illusion that receiving is not a form of agency, and it actually takes intention in order to receive, and it takes effort. Maybe not effort's the wrong word. Awareness.
Yeah.
And the lotus is kind of a representation of growth through receiving.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Yeah, so I think what kind of one of the language we'd use in Buddhism for that is probably conditions. So it's like there are certain conditions that will lead to growth, and I think you're right. Then once we're in those conditions, we can then just receive what we're getting from them. So if we put ourselves in a community, we can then just receive help from that community. If we kind of set up a daily meditation practice, we can just receive the benefits from that. So I think like the image of there's a section of the talk that Sanghadharin says where it's like just like the plant needs soil, light, water, nutrients, other things the plant needs. So we need different things to grow, and I can't remember all of them, but they are like community, so like the warmth of the community, the light of clear thinking, the rain of the Dharma, some other things. So there's kind of there's these different conditions. Just as a lotus needs certain conditions to grow, we need certain conditions to grow as well. So hopefully that links from what you're saying there. Great. So oh no. There you go. Okay, so the lotus is probably the other most common symbol in Buddhism. So it's a universal symbol. So actually the lotus appears in lots of different spiritual traditions, but in Buddhism it's a very significant symbol. And it's basically an archetypal image for growth, purity and transcendence. So I'm going to talk about each of those aspects briefly. So there's growth, purity and transcendence. So with growth, images of the lotus and other plant metaphors. So the Buddha uses Buddhism uses a lot of plant and like vegetative metaphors. And they're used all through the tradition. And they're symbols for the growth of an individual, basically. So an individual has the capacity to grow, just like a plant has a capacity to grow. And one of the things about it is it's a natural image. So it's in the nature of flowers to grow, given the right conditions, yeah? And also, it's in the nature of human beings that we grow, given the right conditions. So that's just what we're talking about there. So if we put ourselves in the right conditions, we will move in the direction of enlightenment. So that's kind of like ethics, meditation, wisdom. If we put ourselves in those conditions, then we are going to naturally move in that direction. And when the Buddha first communicated, he used the image of the path. But even before that, after his enlightenment, he had a vision. He had a vision of humanity that included lotuses. So he looked over the world. So he said, so after he gained enlightenment, he was sat in meditation, and he looked over the world with what we could call his divine eye, and he saw humanity as a great bed of lotus flowers. And all these lotuses were in different stages of development. So some lotuses were still deep in the mud, and this represents minds that are overwhelmed with craving and ignorance. Some were halfway to the surface, others stood clear of the water, and others were opening their petals to the sunlight. And that represented those ready to receive the truth. And now we actually have this image here, which is the symbol, which is a depiction of this vision of the Buddha, of these lotuses in different stages of development. And this vision, it established the lotus as a symbol for the potential for spiritual growth inherent in all individuals. And I think it's important to get this clear on this image, because it's what this is really trying to point to, this image, is that all of us have the potential to grow. It's not a kind of judgmental vision. It's not kind of the Buddha looking around people and being like, oh, they're in the mud. Kind of like, it's not, that's not what it's trying to get at all. What it's trying to get at is that all of us are lotuses, and we all have the potential to grow into these full lotuses. So I think with all Buddhist teachings, it's they're there to help us reflect on ourselves. Yeah, they're not there to help. They're not there to make us look around and judge others. It's always coming back to ourselves and our own experience. So we'll be in different stages of development. Now, looking back, I can definitely see times where I was like well deep in the mud. And now I feel like I'm hopefully a little bit further out of the mud than I was. It's hard to say. Who's to say where we are? But for all of us, we'll have this potential to grow. And that's what this image is trying to get at. It's trying to get that every single human being, regardless of where they are now in their development, has this potential to grow, has this potential to gain enlightenment. And so the other aspect is it's a symbol for purity. And so it grows in the mud, and it blooms on the surface of the water. And the amazing thing is, when the lotus blooms, it's completely unstained. Yeah, so it's not like it comes to the surface and then it's still got all of these dregs of mud covered in it. When it opens its petals, it's completely clean. And what this is representing, it's representing kind of sort of the spiritual in the midst of the worldly, in a way. So one of the ways we talk about it is kind of the unconditioned in the midst of the conditioned. So there's a mind that can appear that's completely free within minds that are not free. So this represents that even when we're caught in the depths of negative mental states, there is the potential for Buddhahood within us. So even when we're if we're in a really, really bad way, if we're in really negative mental states, we can know that even at that point there is the potential in us to be this completely open lotus, this completely enlightened mind. And yet finally, with the transcendence, when the lotus emerges, it comes out of the water completely. So this symbolizes the transcendent nature of the enlightened mind. So when we gain enlightenment, we completely leave behind the suffering of the unenlightened state. Yeah, so it's a state of complete transcendence of all the suffering that we normally get caught in. So yeah, that's the lotus completely leaving the water and the mud. So yeah, it's a symbol of growth, purity, and transcendence. So I'm just we're gonna look now at them as kind of parallel and contrasting symbols, because I think they're both important. And yeah, George kind of touched on this earlier. So they're both important symbols, but they emphasize different perspectives. So they offer different perspectives on the relationship between ourselves, the goal, and what we have to do to get there. So in the path, we are here, the goal is there, and we need to move there. But with the lotus, it's like we are the lotus and we unfold. So it's a very different relationship between us and the goal and the path. So just as enlightenment is the end point of the path, and the lotus as it unfolds, that complete unfolding is enlightenment. Basically, that's the symbol for enlightenment. And I think particularly the lotus, it corrects any misunderstandings that are inherent in the image of the path. So there's a few limitations with the image of the path that I think the lotus corrects for or balances for. So the problem with the path metaphor is it makes a distinction between us, who's the traveller, and the path. Yeah, so it's kind of like there's the path and there's me. But in reality, we are the path. There's nothing other than our own experience. There's nothing other than our own mind. So we are the path. So kind of this image of the path can kind of make a bit of a separation. And it also has this sense of there being some external travel. But really what spiritual growth is about, it's about a total transformation of our being. So when we think of the path, we can kind of think of ourself unchanged, kind of moving along the path. Yeah, so it's like, here's me, there's the path, and I'm just moving along it. Whereas really, when we start practicing, when we start following the path, we transform, we change, to the point where our minds will be completely unrecognizable in the best sense. So what I mean by that is kind of all of the things we find difficult about our mind can transform, but all the things that are kind of really deeply true to us and our values just come out more and more. So as we move along the path, we completely transform. So we don't want to have this sense of, as I move along the path, I'm unchanging and I'm just moving in a direction. It's like there is this complete transformation happening as we go along. And with the image of the path as well, there's a sense of I'm moving along and I'm leaving the previous, I'm leaving the past behind me, or I'm leaving the things behind me in a way. So it's like I'm moving along and everything behind me then stays there. Whereas the lotus illustrates the cumulative nature of the spiritual life. So kind of as we develop awareness, that builds on the awareness and that builds on more awareness. As we develop more kindness, that builds on the kindness that's already there. As we develop wisdom, that builds on the wisdom that's already there. So the spiritual life is a cumulative path. It accumulates as we move along it. And I think, the lotus really is a symbol for that. It also gives us this sense of unfolding or kind of rounding out things that are already there from like a common centre. So when we think of the path, it can kind of be like forward, 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 forward. And I think someone mentioned it can have this sense of striving, this sense of kind of like, I need to keep on going. Which in a way we do need to keep on going. So it's not that we don't want any of that, but we need to balance it with this sense of opening up, this sense of there are qualities here that I just want to become more and more full in my experience. I want to open up to them, and I want to allow them to kind of be more in the world. And we need to have both of these. We don't want to have only one or the other, because we don't want to lose the striving. We don't want to lose making effort, but we don't want it to become narrow. We don't want it to become tight. We want to have this sense of opening up and becoming bigger, and becoming more receptive in a way. So really we need both images. Yeah. So I've talked about both of these. We need the path, and we need the lotus. And we might need different ones at different times. So I've definitely had times where it's really felt like, oh, I need to kind of gather myself and I need to exert myself to keep going, to keep transforming. But there's also been times where it feels like that striving's kind of run out on me and I've needed to change mode into a kind of more of an opening up, more of just allowing it to naturally emerge and trusting that if we put in the conditions, we are going to naturally unfold. So just to kind of recap the main points from each image before we finish. So we need the path. So we do need to have a sense of a clear goal that we're moving towards. And I think that is one of the things that Buddhism really gives us in our life, if we want it, is a real sense of directionality and a positive sense of directionality. Before Buddhism, looking back, I can just tell I was pretty lost. It was kind of like I wanted to live a good life. I wanted to kind of do good things with my mind, but I just didn't really know how. Whereas Buddhism, it gives us a very clear goal that we're moving towards, and it's kind of the highest goal. Is that Buddhahood is the potential of the human mind in a way. There's no higher goal really than the potential of the human mind, and it clearly gives us that goal to work towards. And we also need to know that there are things that we can do to help us get there. There'd be no point of having the goal of Buddhahood if it wasn't possible for us to get there, and there weren't things that we could do to get there. So we need to have this goal, but we also need to know that there are things that we can do to get there. And we also don't want, but we need to be careful that we don't have a sense that we are completely separate from the path, or the path is something that I need to kind of conform myself to or narrow myself to. It's a kind of like we are the path, and we want to move in the direction of a mind that's much more kind, that's much more free, that's much more wise. So we need the image of the path, but we also need the symbol of the lotus. We need to have the symbol of the lotus alive. So we need to have a sense of growth and development being this natural process. So enlightenment, it's a natural thing. If we put in the right conditions, just as a plant will grow, if we put in the right conditions, we're going to grow towards enlightenment. And we want to have a sense that we all have the potential for Buddhahood within us as well. We want to have, that's not just me, that's not just us. All beings have this potential for Buddhahood, so it kind of connects us as well. So whatever's going on the surface, there's this sense that all beings have this potential for Buddhahood within them, and we want everyone to move in that direction. And we want to have the sense that we are cultivating and we're growing these positive qualities. So all the positive qualities we already have, we don't need to leave them behind. We can grow them, we can develop on them, we can keep on becoming bigger and more expansive and have those qualities more and more full in our life and in our minds. So we need to have the path and the lotus. Great. So I'll leave that there.